And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but before we get going, we want to give a shout out to all of our great sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button so fast, okay? These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. They were all great. I have no problem recommending them to you. You should be using them. So take the next 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, and then visit our sponsors. Here we go. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support. Gipper is the official social media graphics solution for the podcast. If you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to help you to create world-class content for your school's social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 3,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made simple. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association management platform for us. It's also something I used every single day as an athletic director for scheduling, for student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Connecting with parents, uploading digital forms, coach tracking, you name it, Home Campus does it. And all you have to do is go to homecampus.com to get started. That's homecampus.com. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to help you set up your school for online ticketing, not just for athletic events, but things like school plays and dances, concerts, even graduation. Hometownticketing.com. It's more support, more security, and more customization. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. We also want to thank Huddle for their support. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches and our kids just loved the tools that Huddle provided that let them all play at their highest level. Go to huddle.com and join the 8 million users and turn your school into a Huddle school. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We want to encourage you to visit vitalsignswalloffame.com and check out their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video boards. They're a great way to show off your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame, or simply share your school's most compelling stories and your proudest moments. The website's vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. Vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank our good friends at Snap Raise. If you're looking for a fundraiser, stop right here. Snap Raise is hands down the top online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school, tremendous success, and you're going to love it too. It works. Go to snapraise.com, check out their other great platforms, but I'm telling you, snapraise.com is going to work for you. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. You've never used a survey to take the pulse of your players, your parents, or your coaches, you're really missing out. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, and athletic surveys will connect you to them, but they'll also connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them create that custom survey for you. athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. I say this every episode, but it's really true. We've got a great guest today. We're going to be visiting with Dave Luke. Dave has an incredible background in athletics, in promotion, as an entrepreneur, and he's going to be sharing his story along with some tips for ADs, coaches, and leaders on the podcast today. So, Dave Luke, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Good to be here, Jake. Good to have the opportunity to just visit with you and your listeners. I am excited about the sharing time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, you and I have talked about this before, and spoiler alert, Dave and I have known each other for a number of years, and we're going to get into that when he shares his story. But let's go and jump right in. Dave, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us up through your own high school and those college years at the University of Oregon. But what's the Dave Luke origin story?
Yeah, Jake, spoiler alert, I'm a duck. Hope that's okay with your listeners. University of Oregon class of 1982. But I was born in Long Beach, California, in the late 50s. And in the early 60s, my parents made the decision we're going to raise our family in Oregon. And so we moved to the Willamette Valley, and we eventually settled in a beautiful little community called Eugene, Oregon. And little did I know how much that community would influence my future, but that's where I grew up. And I grew up doing a lot of the traditional young guy stuff, little league baseball, going out for the fifth, sixth grade basketball team. Played 1 year of football in a local sports association, broke my collarbone. That was the end of that. My point is, I did a lot of the traditional sports as a youngster. So I had that in my background. And then in the early 70s, my folks made the decision to move out of South Eugene, which I'll mention is a direct conduit into the University of Oregon. All the great local runners seem to come through that high school. And it's high level of competition. Of course, I wasn't there yet. I was just a ninth grader when my folks moved us about 15 miles north to a little community called Junction City, community of Eugene. And they built their dream home about 10 miles west in the Coast Range. And so I started ninth grade at Junction City High School. And I thought in my mind, wow, I just moved from a very big pond to a medium-sized pond. And now I can do all those sports I used to do and get cut because I was always cut from baseball and basketball and football. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try it again. And I did. In my ninth grade year, I tried out for the basketball team. I got cut. I decided to run track and field. That went okay. Played 1 year of football, believe it or not, this wimpy little body in my sophomore year. And then the cross country coach and the cross country guys said, hey, Dave, come on, let's get real here. Come on over to the cross country team. And that's what I did. We had a bunch, and of course, cross country is always about depth, right? We had five very good runners, not great runners, not elite runners, but in cross country, it's about depth, and five good runners did very well at the state level. We ended up second in the state meet twice. Second year, we should have won, but one of our runners was trampled in the event. And so runner number six saved us second place. I had great high school years. Track team, I would run the mile, 800, sometimes the 2 mile. We weren't metric in those days. We'd almost reached metric, but not quite. And then, it was all about just camaraderie and fun. My friends and I, we'd go run the local road races that happened all over the place in Oregon those days. It was all about the running boom was starting. We're in the mid 70s now, and we are in the Eugene community. So it's all happening. And it was fun. I got to see, of course, Prefontaine. I watched most of his races. I watched his last race. I watched the 72 Olympic trials, the first
Right.
time they were held in Eugene. It was just great years to be in that environment.
Now, again, I know a little bit of your background. We'll get into that later, but You mentioned the 70s, and again, that's my era. We're basically the same age. I remember watching those same things from afar because I was up in just north of Portland, Oregon. Um, but your high school, you had a very successful high school career, cross country and track, and then collegiately, share with our listeners a little bit about your college experience.
Okay. Well, it took a turn. The first thing I did out of high school was I got on a bicycle and I rode across the country as part of a bicentennial event, 76. And I've always been kind of a vagabond. I've always liked travel. So I went off and did that. But I did come back in the fall and I enrolled in the local junior college in Eugene. It's called Lane Community College. It's a community college program in Oregon in the Northwest. And I was up for doing my best to make it on what's a fairly elite junior college cross country team at the time. A lot of those runners went right into the Oregon program. I was never going to be in the Oregon program, but I thought I'll take this on. Well, the weekend before the season started, I was helping my very good friend, one of the high school cross country team, move his belongings over to his new Central Oregon Community College home. On the way back, we hit a deer at about 60 miles an hour going down a hill, rolled the truck. That's the last time I did not wear a seatbelt, but it was a running, stopping event with a back injury. And I came back and was able to run the last race of the season, which was fun. But mainly I was looking at the backs of all the runners running away from me. So I would say, Jake, that was my end of serious, competitive, motivated running days. I've
Yeah.
had great recreational running days since.
Well, and we're going to go into that direction in our next segment. But you mentioned the bike trip, cross country bike trip. You just graduated from high school. That had to be a serious physical, emotional, mental undertaking.
It was wonderful. Best trip of my life, probably three of the best months of my life. Left 3 days after graduation. It was an organized trip. I was with a group. Um, we traveled anywhere from 50 to 100 miles a day. Secondary roads of America across, 8 or 9 states. Started on the Pacific coast, ended up on the Atlantic coast 3 months later. Camped. It was a very ragtag group in the 70s. These were the adventure people, and just a fun experience. I'm still in contact with at least half of those 12 people that I spent the summer with, and really a great life experience.
Boy, if I bike 10 miles, that's a long way for me. I just can't imagine that type of undertaking. Um, for our listeners, our guest today is Dave Luke. He's a runner, he's an entrepreneur, he's a promoter. We're going to get more into that end and how it applies to you as an athletic director in our next couple of segments. But let's go and take our first break. Going to hear from one of our great sponsors, but we are coming back, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support. Gipper is the official social media graphics solution for our podcast. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to help you create world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your athletes, promote your teams, take control of the narrative of your athletic program. Gipper's used and trusted by over 3,000 high school and college athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made simple. How simple? Even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We also want to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association management software for us. And it's something that I used as an athletic director every single day. I used it for scheduling, used it for uploading scores, used it for student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every single day? uh, uploading digital forms and signatures, connecting with parents, tracking coaches. If you do it as an AD, Home Campus is going to help you do it better. To get started, here's what you have to do. Go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest is Dave Luke. He's a longtime friend, and we're excited to have him on the podcast. Dave, I want to go back to your high school days for a moment because you and some of your teammates started an event that was and is a very significant event in Oregon. And also, as we'll get into it, has some direct application for our athletic directors in the area of promotion and events and things like that. But what happened back during your high school days?
Well, there was a lot of camaraderie and friendship in the members of this cross country team, and the thing that happened, we were just having so much fun hanging out together, running. We were going to other road runs around the state, actually out of state too. We made 2 trips to San Francisco to run the Beta Breakers run there. That was quite an experience. So we were very much enjoying the weekend road run tour. And we decided, and this would be the leaders of the cross country team, I and some friends, good friends still, lifelong friends, that we would start our own run, our own road run. And there was a festival, and there still is a festival, a Scandinavian festival that happens every year in Junction City, Oregon. It's world famous. It's quite large at that time. It had been going on for 10 years when I was entering my high school years, and was not uncommon to have 100,000 people in a town of 2,000 for the weekend. It was a big deal, and it's still a pretty big deal. So we started an event called the Scandia Run in August of 1975. That was after my junior year. And we went to the Parks and Recreation Department of Junction City, and they actually had one, and they had a Parks and Rec director, and he was very agreeable to helping these young men pull off their goal of having an event in this small town Junction City. We put it on. We did the best we could. We used all the best practices that we'd learned from other races, although we wouldn't have even known what that term was in those days, bunch of 15-year-old kids. And we held this event, and 50 people showed up. And, we did everything from a T-shirt, to awards, and we thought we did a great job. We had a lot of fun doing it. So we decided we'd do it again next year. Well, the next year, which was 76, is one of the very few years I have missed personally in the last 50. Because remember, I said I was on that bike trip. I was out having fun riding my bicycle. But in Junction City, the 50-person event doubled to 100. And then the next year, it doubled again. And then it doubled again. Remember, we're in the 70s going into the 80s. Long math short, in 7 years, it was at 3,200 runners. And by the time I made my exit in 1982, it was just under 4,000. So it had turned into a pretty big event. We were all going to college and in the Eugene community for the most part. But what happened was, and we had started organizationally a 501c3 to make it a nonprofit, kept books, and organized it as best we could as young men, learning along the way. The thing that happened next is what happens to a lot of young people. I graduated from the University of Oregon in '82. That was my last year of directing the Scandia Run. We turned it over to the high school. They were happy to take it on, the coaches and the interested parents, and they did for the next 3 decades. What I would say about that experience is it taught me a lot organizationally, and it taught me a lot about working with people. Now, remember, there's no computers in those days. There's no cell phones. Everything is on paper, and we're dealing with 3 to 4 thousand participants and a very interested business community. And I'll get into this later for your ADs, the interface with the business community. But it happened for me at age 19 when Adidas, which was a pretty big running name at that time in long distance, came to us and said, "Hey, we want to sponsor your event. If you'll put our emblem on the back of your shirt, we can do this and that for you," which introduced me to the term gift in kind. What they really meant was we'll pay for a lot of your things like shirts, which is extremely valuable. A gift in kind of gift, the right gift is, dollar for dollar, very valuable. So they were involved one year. The next year, 1979, I think it was, Nike came back and they were in a growth mode at that time. And they said, "Hey, we want to do that." And they had a better deal and they were the local brand. And so we felt real good working with Nike and they were wonderful to work with. Again, this is all 70s stuff. So I learned a lot about everything from sponsorships to business negotiations to just living in the adult world, and how things are done. And that's what the Scandia Run did for me personally as a young man. Um, as I said, I exited and went on to a different career in life at that point in the early 80s.
Well, again, for our listeners, they are many times, wondering, how can we uh, do something to promote our program? How can we, put our teams, our school in the best light? How can we raise money? And yeah, again, here you are as high school kids, and granted, you'd participated in a number of road races, but putting one on is a completely different thing. Um, what are some lessons learned? And again, you mentioned that you were no longer part of the board for a while, but now you're back on as it nears its 50th anniversary race coming up this summer. What are some lessons learned that you can pass on to some of our ADs? I know we're going to talk about some things in another segment, but what are some things that stick out from those early years?
Yeah, I was going to say that the fundraising aspect versus the sponsorship aspect, two totally different things. So I got introduced to fundraising even before we started the Scandia Run, because that same cross country team and the track team, boys and girls, some of those girls you know very well, Jake, from Junction City. Um, we were endeavoring to get ourselves an all-weather track. We had this triangular cinder track that did not drain very well, and we had started a group to start raising funds with the school district, hopefully to get ourselves an all-weather track. And we were very involved in that our junior senior year, and that was actually going out and talking to businesses about sponsorships or donations or both. And so I got that introduction to being proactive in fundraising at a very early age. The Scandia Run, always in those early days, was designed to be a runner's run. We call it the Road Runners Classic because we took a different position with the race. We weren't going to use it as a fundraiser. We weren't going to use it as a um, beneficiary, for all proceeds of this event goes to that group. And so for the first 2 years, through few years, we were very focused on pouring everything back into the race and for the participant. Message to your listeners is this, I think. Always, always identify who your audience is, who you're working for, who your customer is. I'm going to bring a business perspective to this discussion as we move on. But I learned at a very young age not only to work with adults, but to work with people and collaborate and seek mutually beneficial goals in the business community and in the school. And that's been extremely valuable for me in all the rest of my life. Not sure I answered your question, but I'm going to hit it a little harder in the next segment.
Well, look, you answered it great. Okay. And, looking back, and I don't want to get ahead of us, but, looking back, um, what was something that at the time you didn't realize how important it was, but, you either were smart enough or lucky enough, you got it right in those early years. And then what was something that looking back, you just, oh, how could we ever make that mistake?
Okay. Um, I'm going to go away from the Scania run for a minute because as we discussed in a visit this weekend, one of the best lessons I ever learned in competitive athletics is how to lose. And I mentioned that this cross country team, we were on top of the world our senior year. We were heavily favored to win the state meet, and we were having a great time winning every meet along the way. And then lo and behold, we got to the state meet, and crisis happens, big surprise, and we end up second. And that was a huge disappointment for young 17-year-old boys trying to become men. But for me, it helped me learn what it's like to deal with loss, losing. And I've always been a competitive person. And you know me, I'm not one of those everybody gets a trophy guys. And that experience of cross country, the individual effort, but the team scoring aspect of it is huge in shaping a lesson for me, a lifelong lesson on how to win and lose, how to compete. And then I guess I'll share a kind of funny story about the Scania run. I guess you were asking how, what went wrong. So that very first year, we put the start and finish line in downtown Junction City. It's a small community, but a major railroad goes through it. And the park that we started and finished in required that we cross that railroad track to go out into the country for the 10K run, leave town, come back, finish at the same place, cross that railroad track again. Now, we thought we'd done our homework and talking to the, local Southern Pacific Freightliner, connections about the train schedule, and we were all okay. But what happened was right after the very first runners crossed those tracks and were sprinting to the finish line, an unexpected train came through town. Gates came down, stopped all the runners, probably a dozen of them, behind this train. Train went on, gates went up, and about a dozen runners had a mass sprint for the finish line. That is the last time we ever had a course, the first and last time we ever had a Scania run course that crossed railroad tracks. Good lesson.
Yeah. Well, on so many different levels, that was a good lesson. I love it. Okay. We're going to hear some more promotion and entrepreneurial wisdom and probably a little more running from our guest today, Dave Luke. Let's go and take another quick break. But as you know, we will be back. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Go to hometownticketing.com. Their team is going to show you how to set up and sell tickets online for your events, not just athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school is assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Hometownticketing.com. We also want to thank our friends at Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a huddle school. We want to say thanks to our friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Set up that live web demo today. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Dave, uh, I'm sure we have some athletic directors listening, and they're telling themselves, "Well, road run, it's a big deal. I could never do that, or that wouldn't work." I know that you've done some different events. Running's kind of been at the center, but even before you did the Scandia run, you had your own 24-hour relay. So, what are some of the other running things that you've done that maybe our listeners could say, "Hey, that might be a great fit for our community"?
Sure. Yeah, that 24-hour relay was part of that fundraising at the high school I was talking about. And that was just a crazy fun time of running a mile. We had 10 guys. There were guys and gals teams. There were football team was involved. They had their team. And we all ran for 24 hours and we alternated miles and we had a blast. I've done some other relay events in my lifetime, especially in the early years, alternating miles, a two-man 10-mile relay. Some of these things were very competitive. And then some of these events, which have been around long, long time, there's a big relay event in Oregon called the Hood to Coast Relay, and it's a team event, long distance run, takes 2 days. And now you've got a dozen people hanging out together for 30 hours, covering 300 miles. And so relays have always been intriguing to me. When I was in college and at U of O, I went over to Bend and I did a multi-sport relay for the first time. It was called Pole Pedal Paddle, and it mirrored another big event in the Pacific Northwest, been going on forever, called Ski to Sea up in Washington. These are events that combine a lot of different disciplines, and they go usually something like this because they want to go downhill. Start with skiing, and it's ideally downhill skiing. And then when you get to the bottom of the mountain, you change to cross country skis and you ski around cross country. And you get on a bicycle and you ride, for some distance, hopefully downhill. And then you get off your bicycle and you get on the water, and maybe it's a river, maybe it's a lake. In Bend, Oregon, it's the Deschutes River. And then you run. And these multi-sport relays, which could be done as a team, which I did 1 year, or an individual, as I did 1 year, are extremely fun, but still competitive events. They just intrigued me they had the elements of fun, recreation, and competition. So I decided to start one in Eugene. And again, this is in my college years. We're, 5 years into the Scandia run. I'm going to school. We called it the Emerald City Relay. And it went on for 4 years in Eugene in the early 80s. And it was a bike, kayak run event. And that's where the skills and experience I had learned as a very young man came in highly beneficial for putting together this multi-sport relay, because I knew how to go seek business sponsorship. I knew how to promote. I knew how to take care of the customer, which was the participant. And they were just wonderful events. So a great background for me. It's always been my passion. I love running. I don't do much running anymore, but I still like the idea of these multi-sport relays because they just bring together a, a really fun day. So that's how I got involved in that.
Well, I mentioned that coming up this summer at the Scandia Festival, it's going to be the 50th anniversary, the 50th edition of the Scandia Run, and now you're back involved as the director. What are some things that are going to be different? What are some things that for our listeners who might be runners, would entice them to visit Junction City in August?
Oh, great. We hope you do. We're planning a big one. It's going to be a good time. I To answer that question fully, I got to go back about 10 years. Because remember, I left the Scandia run in the 80s to go, get married, start a family, have a traditional career. I might mention our oldest son, in where the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, ended up starting his own recreational events company, and he enjoys doing that. But there was probably 30 years where I would typically come back to Junction City to my hometown festival every year, maybe run in the race, maybe just drink beer in the beer garden and watch the race. But I was not involved as an organizer. About 10 years ago, I came to one of the events and I went out on the course and I watched what was going on and I thought, this is a little too much of a fun run. And the heritage of this event was it was a serious competitive event for some pretty elite runners in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, but even recreational runners. I wanted to get back involved organizationally and start helping the very capable coaches at Junction City High School, middle school, but they got a lot of things going on, right? So this is where I bring in the AD perspective. Okay. I think if the AD at Junction City High School had been more involved in supporting this event, which was supporting the track and cross country teams, maybe doing a little more networking, oversight, community involvement, this event would have probably not necessarily continued to grow in numbers, but in stature. And I think that the reason I got back involved and what I've learned in my career is the importance of the networking, the importance of what does the customer want, in this case, the participant. I and a couple other people that got re-involved, the old timers, the original guard. We got on the board, very gracefully. We were invited in. We had time on our hands. We'd raised our families, and so for the last 10 years, we re-involved ourselves, and we've been overseeing this event. Now, to your point about this year, yes, it's the 50th, and I'm very pleased to be I'm honored to be selected to be the race director this year. And I've got a lot of plans. I've got a good team helping me. It's truly a team effort. Um, what I guess what I'd say about this, again, thinking about your listener, is for the last 10 years, we prepared to basically grow the event, increase the stature, increase the reputation, the desire for people to participate in something very special. But what I haven't mentioned is the Scandinavian Festival, which is at the core of this summer event. It's the reason that a lot of people come to Junction City. It's a world famous small town festival. And of course, it evolved too over the years. And especially with the pandemic, many organizations experienced big hits immediately because they couldn't do their events. In 2020, this event was canceled. But then because generationally, younger people have more choices of things to do, they're not necessarily into the heritage of their ancestors as much. And these events struggle. Okay. So one thing I'm very proud of is that this festival to me is more important than our race. I mean, it really is. It's what ties the community together. And I have to keep in perspective, I'm part of something bigger. But in 2020, when everybody in the world was canceling their events, including this very large festival, and they were very disappointed for the first time in 60 years, they couldn't hold their Scandinavian festival. We pushed, and this went all the way up to the state of Oregon governor level. We pushed to put on our event live, not virtually. Virtually was a concept that started in 2020, and from the get-go, we were pretty adamant about not canceling our event. So there was something that happened in Junction City in 2020. It was our race. And the festival people were ecstatic about that. They did some little things around it. They couldn't have their festival, but they had a few gatherings. And it just drew us all closer together in, turning lemons to lemonade. And that's why the networking and the relationships with the people around you, the organizations around you, the businesses around you, it's just so critical. Because when you need to pivot, you depend on those people to help you make the pivot. And we did. We ran one of the only live events, at least in the Pacific Northwest, in 2020 of any kind, not just running, but any event. You remember it was a surreal time.
Yeah. Dave, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast. But if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and connect with you, we're going to talk a little bit more about your current business endeavors in our next segment. But again, as you've demonstrated, you've got tremendous knowledge in promotion and organization, sponsorships, et cetera. What's the best way that somebody could reach out and pick your brain a little bit?
Well, okay, thanks, Jake. I'm going to give you two emails, which is probably the best way. I'm an email guy. We do keep the Scandia run separate because it's a nonprofit organization working in a community. Yes, I'm on the board. I'm very involved. It has a website that's being rebuilt right now by a new intern. We're big on interns and leadership and training. Dave at scandiarun.com. And I'll get that email, Dave at scandiarun.com. Um, if you want to take a look at what I and my son do in some other areas of promotion, his company is called North by Northwest Relays. You could reach me there at Dave at nxnwrelays.com.
All right, Dave at Scandia Run and Dave at North by Northwest Relays. Okay, want to make sure I get that relays in there. Um, Dave, Luke, we are coming back for some more. So, listeners, please stay with us. We're going to take another quick break. I know that's shocking to our regular listeners, but I promise we're coming back with more best practices on the Educational AD podcast. We want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website, which is vitalsignswalloffame.com, and check out their interactive touchscreen. That's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to showcase your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame, or simply share your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. Like I said, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. They're going to show you how their products can impact your school, your athletic department, and you. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Snap Raise. Have you ever done a fundraiser for weeks and weeks and then got little, if any, return on investment? Well, stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. They even have a program where they will give you your funding before you actually do your fundraiser. Nobody else does that. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other platforms like Snap Manage, Snap Store, FanX. But SnapRaise is the fundraising platform. That's snapraise.com. Check them out today. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Dave, you've really done, like a master class for an athletic director who might not have the experience or even the tools, as we like to say on the podcast, um, in things like promotion and organization and working with sponsors. As we, begin to wrap up our visit with you, again, what are some things that maybe you haven't had a chance to share in our previous segments that could help our listeners, organization leadership, branding. And again, we haven't really gone into this, but you're very successful. You had an entire career in business and management and promotion and branding. And now you've recently, if I could say, come out of a sort of a retirement and bought a new company and you're doing it all over again. So, what are some things you can share with our athletic director listeners from your experience that you think would help them?
Well, I've got three tips in the next segment that I'm going to nail that question, but I am going to say this leading up to it. Because I know a lot of your listeners are educators. And I want to say that the educators in my young life knew how to treat young people as adults or trying to become adults, adolescents moving forward. And I think that's a skill. So maybe it's not specific to athletic directors, but the athletic directors are interfacing with the coaches, the teachers. And I just wanted to share that you have a huge impact on young people, and even at the college age, the impact is huge. But I'm thinking now high school. And I also want to say, I think it's okay for young people to get a close-up look at adult decisions at a young age. Not that they're making them, but I discussed earlier how we were knocking on businesses' doors, we were soliciting, we were seeking sponsorships. As a teenager, I was making business deals. And I think that um, adults today need to expect a high level of performance. Remember, I'm a very competitive person, not just athletically, but intellectual and social expectations of their young people, and they'll respond. They're always mirroring us. So I wanted to get that in. Um, Another thing that I recommend for the ADs that we've had a lot of success with in our organization, but there's a lot of similarities. I really believe in internships. We've had two interns from the University of Oregon that worked for the Scandia run umbrella organization. It's called the Valley South Athletic Club. It's a 501(c)(3). That's the nonprofit. 6 board members. 3 of them are the coaches in the community. 3 of us are the old timers. But we all had a desire to promote leadership. And internships are an excellent way to do many mutually beneficial goals. One, these young people are mirroring us. So just knowing that you have that relationship, that mentoring going on, they're going to watch and learn. Second thing is, and there's all kinds of like funny names for um, underpaid labor, slave labor, etc. But there's no substitute for 101, getting your hands dirty, having to go talk to a neighbor about, the events that's going to come down their street, figuring out how to make a promotional banner. And, you think you're a graphics guy, but when you actually start producing, production, you learn a lot. And anyway, these internships give us a great opportunity to um, let young people test their skills. And so I'm really big on those. Um, Another thing I want to touch on is vision. Okay. The the vision that I had in my younger years and continue to have today is pretty big. and some people would say it's grandiose. And it's the people that see your big vision as grandiose that are the biggest risk to you shrinking your vision. And I'm going to hit this hard in the next segment, but I want to touch on it now. If you're an athletic director or any leader, and you come into an organization for the first time, or like I mentioned, I came back into the Scandia run after 30 years, you know, a lot of things had changed. You come into an organization, you only get one chance in life to make a good first impression. Well, it's the same with vision. You only get one chance to set a big vision. Now, after that, people are going to be looking at it and evaluating it, limiting it, saying why you can't do that. Yeah, you can't blindside people. I'm not saying that. You have to have the relationships and you have to have the time and the skin in the game and everything else to be able to get the rapport of the people you're trying to lead. But I'm going to say um, to your leaders, to your athletic directors. Remember, I come at this from a promoter, businessman, event manager perspective. But it's true in life. When you go into a group, I'm thinking your coaches meetings. I've listened to some of your podcasts, Jake, about coaches meetings and how to prepare for those and such. Start big, start big, and because there's people there that want to support the vision, and they will. And then the ones that don't, and unfortunately, they're usually is people that don't think as big as you might. They don't have the opportunity to put the ceiling on the vision prematurely. And sure, things can get downsized, things can be tweaked. Well, we did that for 6 months. We're gonna, we learned a lesson, but you'll never get another opportunity to lay out a big vision. So I say go big or go home.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Uh, well, Dave, this has just been cool spending some time with you on the podcast. But we're not done yet. As you said, you've listened to the podcast. You know, we always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but anyone who's listened to this so far knows that you've got a pretty strong background in athletics and especially in best practices. So, let's go and take a break. We're going to hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. And when we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director, a brand new leader, but I'm only going to let you put 3 items in their toolbox. So let's take that break. When we come back, we're going to find out what Dave Luke is going to put in his new athletic director toolbox. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for their support of the podcast. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, the people that want to gripe about everything, but that's really only a small percentage. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you to that small group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your parents, your student athletes, even your coaches that support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable piece of information to have when you're talking to a frustrated student athlete or a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that'll let you take the pulse of your students, your parents, and your coaches. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been spending time with an old friend, Dave Luke, longtime runner, longtime promoter, and he's definitely shared some best practices with us today. But right now, I'm going to challenge him to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let him put 3 things in that toolbox. So, Dave, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Thanks, Jake. And I truly hope this is helpful. I've touched on some of these things in these previous segments. Now I'm going to try to summarize. The first one I'm going to say is be bold about teaching competition. Um, I think competition in all walks of life is great. I think it can be overdone, but one of the best lessons I learned in my life at a young age was how to compete. It's good to compete. America competes. I won't go patriotic here, but there's a lot of reasons why learning how to compete is a good thing. I said I'm not a everybody gets a trophy guy. I'm far from it. But my point to your ADs is this: don't be afraid to teach what you're naturally involved in your work of athletics, which is competition. Competition is great in all areas of life. You can model it. You can teach young men and women how to win and lose gracefully. You can encourage competition where, unfortunately, and we see in some areas of life today that people are just getting used to doing good enough. Encourage competition, reward competition, um, help people learn to lose. I mentioned that earlier. I learned at an early age, but it's okay to lose and it's okay to win. And it's a great thing. And you're in a perfect spot to encourage your coaches, encourage your programs, set a culture where competition is okay.
Oh,
Secondly,
yeah.
uh, oh, excuse me. Go on. Here we go. Um, I would say that for an athletic director, I can't think of very many positions where connectivity isn't more important. Connect, connect, connect. Now, you've got, your community, your school community, your coach community, your athletic community, and obviously they interface out into the greater community, that bigger community that you're in. Maybe it's the university, maybe it's the town, but it's out there. It's beyond your silo. And when you connect with the business community, the spectator community, um, the organizational, the government, whatever, beyond your perceived reach, you are ready to do a couple things when they happen. One, opportunity. You never know who's out there that's thinking what they could do for you, should do for you, might do for you and your constituents. And you don't know unless you're connected. And you won't be connected unless you get proactive about it. The second thing is, and I've seen this happen, I'll give you a good example of it. In crisis, when you have to pivot, it's too late to build relationships. You're leaning on the relationships you got. And so I mentioned back in 2020, with the very surreal pandemic experience we all had, that we pivoted. All the organizations around us were doing the natural thing, shutting down their events. And we decided, no, and I won't get into how we did it, but we did it safely and effectively. No, we got an organization here that can put on this event. We don't need to cancel it. We can pull this off. And that was because we had connected with the community, we'd connected with the government. Like I said, it went to a pretty high level. The connectivity was there to be able to do what we needed to do when we needed to pivot. So I'd encourage connectivity as number two. The third thing, and I got into this in the last segment, is vision and how you implement it. And when I think about your story, Jake, and I enjoyed hearing your story, Jan's story this weekend about your career, all the stops you made, coaching, ADs. It's fascinating story. What I picked up from that is you had a dozen times in your lifetime where you had to walk into a new setting, new group of people, some barely knew, and set an agenda. Okay. And you've got skilled people, interface skills. You've shown that, and this is a wonderful thing you're doing with a podcast. But I know that goes beyond that. You were prepared, you thought about your audience, and you thought about how you were going to set that vision. And I mentioned earlier that if you set it too small, then people will keep it small. Come in, the term I used, you come in grandiose and then you'll get shut down. So you have to hit the mark. But I'm very convinced that leaders, people that know how to lead, know how to implement vision to the betterment of the people they're leading. And athletic directors, you're leaders. I mean, you're leading that athletic community, the coaches and everybody that interfaces, the student athletes. I mean, some of you listening to this have massive groups that you're leading. So I guess I'll wrap up by saying take the skills set that you have, these tools in the toolbox thing is great. I really appreciate Jake introducing me to that. And use them to be bold in what you do. I think there's a great place for being bold out there. I don't think this is the world for timid folks. I love a bunch of introverts in my life, but we need boldness in what you're doing, and the vision is the last thing that I think of that has to be the most bold.
Oh boy, you probably saw me scribbling those down. The vision is great. You and I talked about connecting. Building your network is just so critical in any profession. Thanks so much for sharing those tools, and thanks so much for sharing today. Once more, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, and listeners, I think you've got a tremendous resource here from a lot of different areas, a lot of different tools that you can augment in your toolbox. Dave, what's the best way that our listeners can get a hold of Dave Luke?
We'll keep it nice and simple. Dave at Scandia, Scandia, ScandiaRun.com. Dave at ScandiaRun.com.
All right. Well, Dave, continued success in your business endeavors. We'll have to get you back on to talk about those specifically. But again, thanks so much for sharing with our listeners. And you mentioned Jan. Jan and I will be looking forward to playing our tiny little role in the 50th edition of the Scandia Run this coming summer.
Thanks so much, Jake. This has been very enjoyable. You're doing great thing for those ADs out there. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you in Junction City in August.
Absolutely. Thanks again. For listeners, we appreciate you listening. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of each interview to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, and we hope you come back. We do 2 interviews a week, and our regular segments just about every day. We've got some new content. So thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast. Have a great day.